and Spinning Wheel of Death. We're live. I thought there'd be
Hey,
some excitement. Rob, how you doing?
doing great, Isaac. How's it going, man?
Fantastic. It's launch day, as you know, as we've talked about, and
Oh yeah,
DRAGH'S Demise is now out in the world.
so I love that cover, dude. Like I don't know the just the crispness of that cover. It's something that is both uniform with your series, Sunborn series, and something that like it's just so clean. Like it's so clean and so crisp, even though there's like blood all over the cover.
And it's so, you would have been into the creation of it. I was talking to the break-ins and
Yeah.
and there was a hand at one point gripping the crown.
Yeah.
There was a different color, and
Mm-hmm.
that's always the really interesting part of releasing a book is like the art means the world. Like if you don't get the art right, it doesn't set the tone for your book.
Like contrary to what people say, people do judge books by their covers. Like it's not something that's avoidable in marketing or publishing a book at all. Yeah, I mean, you knocked it out of the park with the marketing for this. The cover is great. The novella is great. For anyone watching, if you have not already ordered the book or pre-ordered the book, you should do it absolutely right now. This is a really, really good, succinct, visceral, and just it's such a brutal novella, and it managed to do so in a novella's level of word count, and it serves as a really, really good jumping in point to the Sunborn series, which is just it's a harsh world. It's a harsh world that you've created, and you do a really good job of just throwing the reader right into it from the jump.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll do kind of a little bit of an intro. So I'm Isaac. I'm Isaac Hill, the author of the Sunborn series, and I've got now DRAGH'S Demise out today, and the Dragon Legion, which came out last May. So member of the break-ins with Rob Leigh and a number of other folks. And funny enough, Rob was my first author friend.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, man.
On Instagram last year and getting me into this crazy life of releasing books.
Yeah, I know. You were actually my first author friend out there as well. So it was nice. We were posting maybe one, we'd post something to Instagram and we get 1 or 2 likes, and I'm like, oh great, Isaac was one of those likes. Solidarity, man. It was just really nice to know that when absolutely nobody was paying attention to any of our stuff, at least I knew I could count on one person. So
yeah. I felt the same way, man. That's funny.
Yeah. So give a little bit of background on DRAGH'S Demise. Some people watching might have read the Dragon Legion, but for those who might be wondering where this fits in your series, maybe give a little background on that.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that. So DRAGH'S Demise is an answer to a question in the Dragon Legion. So the Dragon Legion is about a prince who refuses the crown and joins a legion of criminals. And the question was posed to me, what did that prince, Dragh Sunborn, do to get into a legion of criminals? Yeah. And so DRAGH'S Demise is the answer to that question. Now, funny enough, when I wrote the Dragon Legion, I didn't have an answer to that question. I never even thought, what could this man who should be king do in order to get into a legion of criminals? And so I put thought into that, and DRAGH'S Demise was the creation of that idea.
Nice. So I guess that begs one of my first questions for you, and I wrote down a slew of them. We don't have to get to all of them if we run out of time or whatever. But was it always the plan to write this novella then? If you're saying that this answers the question that the Dragon Legion poses, was this a question that you maybe intended to answer only for yourself and then leave ambiguous, or when you found the answer, was that something where you're like, okay, this is too good to not share with the readers, the people who have already read the Dragon Legion?
That's a really good question. So, did I plan to tell this story? Um, the idea of the Sunborn series is that it's a generational series about the Sunborn family trying to regain their empire that was taken from them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first book in the Sunborn series that I wrote was about Dre's grandson. Now, I haven't published that
Okay.
book because it was
Yeah.
terrible. It was really bad. I wrote it in NaNoWriMo, and anyways, long story short, awful book.
Okay.
Not well written, but the story captivated me about this man, Dre, Sunborn,
Mm-hmm.
and the Dragon Legion was born out of that book. How did he get the Dragon Legion? And so I never in a million years thought that he would actually be joining a legion of criminals. And
Mm-hmm.
I never thought that I would be telling the story of how he became a criminal.
Yeah.
It's this strange creation that just kind of appeared. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's always really fun to like learn other people's creative process into how the story got into its final form, because very often it's something completely different. Like it's always something that is absolutely nothing like the final product. Maybe there was a character who's actually a bad guy, but now in the in the final draft he's a good guy, or vice versa, or maybe a battle was supposed to go completely different and change the whole trajectory, but then just something happened when you were writing it and you went, oh, well, I actually want to go this way. And then it's a discovery process for you. So that I'm excited to see where the Sunborn series goes after Dragon Legion and Dre's Demise, just to see the trajectory of this world that you've created. And so how long have you kind of been in this world? How long have you been in the Sunborn series?
Good
Like
question.
mentally, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started writing just in general when I was young. So I remember writing stories after the Lord of the Rings movies came out.
Oh yeah.
Little handwritten stories on pieces of paper, and then in high school I remember doing some creative writing on my own, and going into college, and then I stopped for many years, and then the pandemic hit, and in talking to my wife and trying to figure out what to do with all of my time, because I was home alone lots, or home without anything to do. And I tried a bunch of different hobbies. I tried painting, I built a lot of stuff, and then I tried writing, because I'd always really wanted to write. I wanted to be an author. I never had the discipline or dedication. And
Yeah.
the first story I wrote that I completed was a short story about it was about basically Indiana Jones. It wasn't called Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
The guy's
Yeah.
leaving part. He had a little gun on his hip. He had a whip. He was in Egypt. It basically was Indiana Jones. And then I wrote another fantasy book in my first NaNoWriMo kind of style event. And this was probably 2020. And then I think it was probably around 2021 when I wrote the first Sunborn series book. And I just didn't know that it was a series at that time.
Yeah.
And then I wrote another one. And the next book that I wrote was the Dragon Legion.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I think
it's funny how that stuff works out. I mean, everyone's writing journey is different, but yeah, I think a lot of people's ambition to write something and create something and do something with their time really came out of the pandemic, as awful a time as it was. It's definitely what started me thinking like getting actually serious about writing and publishing.
okay.
So how many books do you do you infer, or how many books do you think the Sunborn series might get up to, or do you think it could be ongoing until a certain point when you feel you're done?
Until Empire come. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
until the Empire falls.
yeah, exactly. So this is kind of been evolving for me. So when I first wrote the Dragon Legion, I thought I was writing a trilogy, a generational trilogy, and because every good series is a trilogy, or so I thought.
Yeah.
Now, some of the best in the business, like Robert Jordan and Pierce Brown and Sanderson, they've taught us that that's not the case. And so a lot of the feedback that I heard from readers after releasing the Dragon Legion was they loved the character Dre. So I was very surprised by this, because I always thought, like, he's my favorite character, but he's kind of a rebel.
Yeah.
Not the nicest kind of person you'd want to meet. But people really liked him. And so I decided that instead of skipping generations to tell 3 stories about the rise of or the gaining of an empire, I would tell 5. So I had an idea in my mind about where it was going. I'd written most of book 2, which was 2 generations later. And then the feedback was, we want to hear more about Dre. And I thought, well, I'm an indie author, so I'll do that. And so now it's going to be 5 books and a novella. And I'm thinking, it's nice to write kind of a little slice of life every now and again after you finish 100,000 plus words.
Yeah.
In a novel. And the novella it was so pleasant to write. I wrote it in a week.
When I
was on vacation, and then I've been playing with it and cleaning it up and modifying it ever since. So it's been a real pleasure. And so it's 5 books, 1 novella, probably a couple more novellas along the way.
I was just about to ask, like, these questions that you pose in your books, I feel like the novella to answer those questions is such an intriguing thing. And if it's a generational series, I feel like there could be a novella that just peppers in a little bit of extra information, a little bit of extra knowledge, a little bit of extra seasoning to every generation. And it's not that that needs to happen, but if you feel like it needs to happen, or if you feel like you want that to happen, that's definitely a good like formula to go with too.
Yeah, and because I mean, when you write a book, there's so much that you don't get to include, right? I mean, you know this, like, there's so much more that you have to create as an author, that you either have notes on or files on, or it's in your mind, and to push the story forward, you need to create that backstory in that world, right? And so it's so much fun to dip into that, and I can see myself going back to that well pretty regularly to write fun stories.
Yeah, the world that you create in your head is so expansive, and this goes for a lot of other authors too, not just like fantasy authors, sci-fi authors. Sometimes I have no idea how they keep it all together, because a lot of times it doesn't just go within this world that you created. It's a world and then other worlds and a whole universe, but regarding your world and how you built it, it feels like you've it sounds like you go a lot off of history. So what are some historical inspirations, and even other pieces of media that have inspired the Sunborn series?
That's a really interesting question. No one's ever asked me that before. So I would say that the Sunborn family is kind of your empire, your allegorical Roman Empire. The tribes in the north are your Germanic tribes, inspired, and then the horde in the west is most certainly Genghis Khan inspired. So that's kind of where I pulled all that from. I've got some pirates thrown in there, in the Valerian Islands pirates, and I think that those would be inspired by real life, the pirates through the ages, right? I'm from Nova Scotia, so Nova Scotia has a very rich history of pirates and rum runners. So we've got Oak
I
Island.
didn't know that.
Oak Island. Oh yeah, yeah. So
Wow.
all down the coast, you'll see these 300, 200, 400-year-old homes, and they'll be sea captains' homes.
Wow.
Because they were rich as the hills, or they were British admirals' estates. Like there's a estate down near the southern part of Nova Scotia that was Admiral Argyle's, and he was in control of the British forces at the time, and I think it was the 1800s. Like very interesting sea history here, and so I think that kind of informed that part of my writing as well. So love of the ocean.
One of the things about I don't know if this is the way that it goes with like the Canadian education system with like teaching Canadian history and then world history is like living in the United States. It's so American centric because they want to teach you about the country that you live in, but I feel like you don't really get a whole lot of opportunity to learn about the world at large, except for a very very one-sided view or a very narrow viewpoint of, and then this is what happened with Africa. This is what happened with South America. This is what happened with Asia and Europe in like the briefest possible footnotes during your regular American history lessons. And so it's interesting to hear bits of information and bits of history through talking about fantasy and fiction that is written by people who are passionate about this type of stuff.
Yeah, we've got the same thing, Canadian history, and you get your little slice of life, and then you grow up and you listen to Dan Carlin, and you think, oh my gosh, like the history in Europe and Asia and South America and the United States, like there's so much depth to it. It's such a cool world, and history is so rich, and I find it funny when you're talking with authors or you're talking about books that are inspired. If we wrote some of the stuff that was true allegorically, people wouldn't even believe the books, right? History is just rich with examples that are just outlandish.
Yep, it's crazy. It reminds me of like if you have this big jar of coins and change, and then for the Americans who are watching this, is like if you had this big jar of change as like the history of the world, and then the American education system says, okay, here's only dimes. Like you just get like you only get like the 10-cent pieces, and then that's all you learn about, with maybe you can pick out like another, like you can pick out a quarter or you can pick out a penny or something like that every once in a while, and you don't really have a whole lot of like a diverse coin pouch there. That's kind of how I feel with learning about history, and of course you can delve deeper into those that you choose that as your field of study, but that's not everybody, and so a lot of people just grow up with this view of history that is either very one-sided or it's just not very well rounded, and so it doesn't give them a good understanding of like how different pieces around the world connect into this whole, and where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find like as a storyteller, I'm enthralled by those stories and the different perspectives and histories, and like even inside of my writing group, I've got an in-person writing group, and obviously I'm part of the break-ins with you, and both of those writing groups, the perspectives and the different parts of the world and histories are endlessly fascinating and informative to telling stories.
Yeah, it's just it's an endless wealth of possibility. And not just the actual history and stuff that happened, but folklore a lot too. Folklore is a huge inspiration for fiction. Like myself, I like Greek mythology. You got people like John Gwynne. Shouts out to the Fury of the Gods. He, goes a lot off of Nordic and Celtic folklore, I believe. Anna Smith Spark, Celtic folklore. So it's just really interesting to see what different pieces of folklore people pull from to create something new and unexpected, and a lot of times very beautiful. So.
Well, and that's something that I pulled from. We live in a place in North America that was populated well before our European
Mm-hmm.
ancestors settled.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has come up in Nova Scotia, and I'm sure throughout North America, is just the acknowledgement that we're in a
Mm-hmm.
place where we've settled. And so
Mm-hmm.
in Nova Scotia, the Mi'kmaq call this place Mi'kma'ki, and they talk a lot about that, and we talk a lot about that. And as an adult, I'm learning a lot about that. And they were an inspiration for the tribes in my book as well, as a kind of a hearken to where I live, right, and the people around me. It's yeah, the world informs our book sometimes in ways we
Mm-hmm.
don't realize. I don't know that I realized that until I really reflected on it after I had written it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's not really all that plain to see until we've written it in our own words.
Mm,
Um, which has its drawbacks. Sometimes I'm not super cognizant about something I've written until I read it, and then I'm like, ooh, well, maybe I should think a little bit more about that or something like that.
yeah.
Or maybe it's time for me to go do more research on something. And that's part of growth. That's part of growth, not just as a writer, but as a person.
Yeah, and I really had to think about that after I'd written the Dragon Legion and talking about kind of a tribal people, and my
Hmm.
editor had brought up a couple of points about colonialism and those things that could be interpreted to be negative. And I thought,
Hmm.
these people in my book, the tribal people, were treated poorly, and that's a really good point. That there is morality and ethics and in your stories, and
Hmm.
you should honor that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. History is the greatest teacher.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. So, what are some of the we talked about the historical aspect, but what are some of the pieces of media that have inspired or informed your writing on the Sunborn series?
Ooh, good question. Braveheart's obviously a big
Hmm.
inspiration. Arthurian legends, so all of the different Arthur movies.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big fan of those kind of medieval crusades, medieval stories, um, Kingdom of Heaven, the
Hmm.
Robin Hood with Russell Crowe, the Robin Hood with Kevin Costner,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
where the protagonist has fault too, right? Like
Hmm.
I think the imperfect hero is the big lesson for me in how I write my characters. I want
Hmm.
my characters, Dre specifically. I want Dre to be interesting and multidimensional, and to me, part of that is making sure that he's not perfect, and he's
Hmm.
far from perfect. I want him to make the right decisions. I want him to learn,
Yeah.
but you know,
Hmm.
the the hint might be in the title of demise, because the
Yeah.
book is about his demise.
Yeah. It's and a demise it is.
Yeah.
I can say that without spoiling anything, but you're very right. Like you don't want the character progression of someone to be just a straight slope. You want there to be bumps. You want there to be pitfalls. You want, because that's what makes it interesting. Because our lives as people don't just go in a straight line. They all have ups and downs. They have pitfalls. They have crags. They have, it's all over the place, and it's not realistic to have a person who's absolutely perfect. And a lot of times it's a facade. That's something that I do with my own characters is I make sure that they at least have some faults that they can improve on, and a lot of times those faults are what keeps the plot from going in the direction that it needs to go, or the goal of the protagonist group. Their their shortcomings as people keep them from achieving their goal as a group.
Right. Right. And so are you an outliner? Like, do you go into that detail in your outline for your stories about the character
Yeah,
and those?
yeah, I think that there's broad strokes of what you want your characters to be dealing with, or what you think your characters' struggles are going to be. And then I think Justin Lee Anderson did a really, really good job of saying you add wayposts in there. So you add places where you think there's going to be a shift in their character or their trajectory, and it ultimately leads them to where you want them to end at the end of the story.
Interesting. And it's funny because, now that you bring that up, that's kind of the premise of this story is
Hmm.
um, Dre is faced with a choice, and the
Hmm.
choice is a moral and ethical dilemma, and he
Hmm.
has to choose: does he do what he thinks is right, or does he do what is being ordered to do? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, to your point, I guess that is his waypoint. Of the shift is make your choice
Hmm.
and beware the consequences of that.
Exactly. Exactly. And these wayposts they don't just start and stop within the confines of a single book. It's the entire series. And one of my favorite things to do is go back in shows or book series that I've read or watched and followed along with for a long time, and just read a chapter of my favorite character where they started out. Like, for anyone who's excited for Stormlight 5 to come out in December, like, I'll go back to Way of Kings and I'll read like one of the first Kaladin chapters, and it's such a stark difference to from where he started to where he is now.
Right.
And I'm really excited to see where Sanderson takes it in book 5 as well. So it's it's character progression is not an easy thing. That's why we have people help us out with it, and with beta readers and editors, um, and it just makes it all the better when we see that full circle of how they improve as characters or don't improve as characters, both as an author and as a reader.
Yeah.
When you're an author, maybe like you've known that a character is gonna experience his downfall for a long time, and then when they finally get to that lowest point, you're like, yes, yes, this is what I wanted all along.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but then when you're reading and you see a character go through that same thing, you're like, no, I had such high hopes for them. So it's a great experience to get invested in these characters, both as a writer and as a reader.
Yeah. And I think that what I didn't know about my writing
Hmm.
until my stories went out into the world was I'm very much a character driven writer. So,
Hmm.
excuse me, Dre being my first main character in the book and in the novella. The story is about Dre. So
Hmm.
he's moving through this plot, he's moving through this world, and to me it's all about him. It's all about the focus on how is he feeling, why is he making
Yeah.
those decisions, how does he feel about the people around him, his
Hmm.
friends, his family, his loved ones, his horse, right? And
Yeah.
a big part of Dre's demise is
Hmm.
is about the cavalry and his horsemanship and his relationship with his beast of burden,
Hmm.
for us. So I think that your character can inform your plot in ways that always surprise me, and that's what I really
Yeah.
enjoyed about writing Dre's Demise is it
Hmm.
took turns that I did not expect because of the character that I was building, which I thought was the most important part.
Yeah. Hmm. And I think that Dre's demise lended a really, really good opportunity for discovery in that sense, because you know where he starts in Dragon Legion,
Hmm.
and you know that endpoint, but you have all of this empty map for him to make that trajectory to get to where he is at the start of Dragon Legion. So it's not like you are George Lucas like jamming people into their New Hope starting positions at the end of Revenge of the Sith. You're coming up with a roadmap of someone's life that wasn't previously there, that blends pretty seamlessly into the start of the main series.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think that that was the goal. So we're indies, both of us, and we've talked a lot about as a group, the break-ins, and you and I, about novellas and their purpose and the fun of writing a novella. And what I can say about DRAGH'S Demise is I loved writing it. It was a pleasure. Like I said, I was on vacation when I wrote it. I wrote it in a week. The core story, I mean, editing took more time on this book than writing it. Writing it just flew, and I really enjoyed it. But the entry point into the series is something I took very seriously. I'm giving the novel away or the novella away for free. So if you sign up to my newsletter, you get a free e-copy. The physical you have to buy on Amazon because, of course, Amazon charges money to print, and that is life. If I could give the print copies away, I would, but maybe I'll run a giveaway when we get our novellas out. We could do a giveaway or something.
I've been saying that we should get a bunch of indies together, not just break-ins, but a bunch of indies in general, and just do a massive novella giveaway, like at the end of the year or something like that, like this huge novella contest giveaway or something. It'd be so fun. It'd be so cool to do. And it'd be a really good way to get people excited about novellas. And if we do it at the end of the year, it might be a little difficult because we're getting pretty close to it now. But if we do it at the end of the year, it really just caps off 2024 as being the year of the novella. So many amazing novellas have come out this year. The first one coming to the top of my mind in January being Josh Walker's Rest of the Gods.
Cool.
It was such a refreshing thing to have a short form story that packs such a punch and does something that maybe you're not expecting, and it's fun as a reader and it's fun as a writer. And you're right, we have been talking about just how refreshing and fun it is for novellas. My novella that comes out in a couple of days, The Death Metal Bard, that novella was something that I wanted to dip my toes into to see if it would even work, and it ended up working better than I ever could have expected. And I think that's something really nice for indies to try, if they're wondering if maybe something is going to work or not, to give it a try in the novella format instead of committing to this massive 100K word novel. And oftentimes it works better than anyone could have expected, and people just go crazy for these books. One of my favorite reads from last year was Sista Samurai by Tatiana Obe. And it was a fantastic book, really succinct read, but it had so much care and depth, and just it had so much energy to it that you couldn't put it down, and you were done with it in just about a day, and you ended up craving more. I think she's working on a sequel to it, so thank goodness for that. But if anyone's ever thinking about trying a new direction for storytelling or wanting to try something outside of a main series they're doing, novellas are the way to go.
Oh, it lets you flex creative muscles that you don't get to flex in a novel. We always talk about in writing circles, well, start with short stories and they inform how you write stories, and then it's not quite true, right? Because the muscle that you flex to create a book, a novel, is not the same creative muscles you have to flex to create a succinct novella. Right, like we are victims of overwriting a lot of the time. And editing is that the cutting down of the process and cleaning, and it's very difficult. But something small like this it's a completely different storytelling experience because the arc is different. You have to immediately ramp up, and I'm a very big believer in drop them in the middle. So I'm not telling the pre-story. I'll kind of give a spoiler on the first paragraph.
Yeah.
Dre wrenched his sword forward, the blade releasing from the head he'd cleaved as he rode by a foot soldier. He looked forward, gripping his horse's body with his legs. His shoulder twinged, but he gripped his sword harder, pushing it up ahead of him into a high guard. So you're in the middle of a battle.
Sick. It's so sick, dude. It's so good. It's just it's like it reminds me of the beginning of Gladiator, where you're just like wrenched right into like this super bloody, dirty, disgusting battle. And like I love it. I loved it from like the first paragraph.
Well, I appreciate that, and I gotta say thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a beta and reading through this, giving me feedback, because
Oh, absolutely.
it's a lonely world writing, so it's always good to have friends to read.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the best parts of, you know, being part of the break-ins or being part of writing groups, is that everyone is, you know, they might be in a different spot in their writing journey than you, but they're all kind of going through the same thing. Like they're all going through the same, like for lack of a better term, loneliness and dealing with, you know, self-doubt. Like they write a paragraph and they're like, oh, I don't really like that. But then, you know, maybe they come back to it with fresh eyes, or they show it to their writing group and everyone's like, oh man, this is really good. Like I really enjoyed reading this. And it's a lonely world, but I think one of the nice things about the indie community is that everyone responds to that by saying, no, you're not by yourself. You got all of us around you. We're all rooting you on. You're doing great. Stuff like that. It's just
Hands down.
it's so, yeah, it's so uplifting. And I'm sure that there's a lot of community ties in the trad space as well, but having only experienced one of those, I think the indie space is fantastic.
Yeah, and you know, I think that that's probably the best part of this journey, right? You know, we talk about the trope of found friends, but you
Yeah.
do find your friends, right? I count you as one of them. Is you find
Yeah,
these
you
people
as
that
well, man.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
You can talk books, and it's incredible. And so the other cool thing that I love about novellas is that you can share it. It is low cost to the reader. It can engage you in some interesting story, and it's an interesting form to tell a story. So this book is, what is it? 72 pages.
Yeah.
And you can burn through that in an hour or two, right? It's a very low cost entry to a series. And you know, Death Metal Bard is a lot longer than mine, but it's easy to read because the story is kind of a compressed arc, very interesting, because everything is plopping into action or conflict or a problem to solve with a really cool character. And anybody that's on, Rob and I are going to be talking all about that on Saturday night.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
it's gonna be great. I'm excited. Catch us in the mosh pit, guys. It's gonna be a blast. And I'll be talking with Beard of Darkness about it tomorrow as well. So
awesome.
I'm really excited for it. Going back to what you said about, you know, plopping people right in the middle of the action and being a part of you know, just kind of wrenching them, throwing them in the middle. I think that one thing that's very different with novellas, and something that you learn very quickly, is you have to be very you have to make a lot of like important choices with your words. You have to really be succinct. You have to make sure that you're not overwriting or over explaining or something along those lines, because you're dealing with a limited page count, or hoping to keep it at a limited page count. So the choices that you make, you have to make sure, like, okay, I'm going to do this once and I have to do it right. That's not easily done, and it's something that some authors may struggle with, especially if you're used to writing a lot longer books where you have callbacks and you have reiteration of stuff, which for a lot of books is very important. But in novella, you know, we as a society might have short attention spans, but that's the great thing about a short book, is that you don't have to go back and reread something. Like, it's still fresh in your mind.
Yep. Yeah, and you don't get to pull back into a different story either. So it's you know, that's the thing about DRAGH'S Demise that I tried to focus on while I was writing it, is I want the reader to be able to pick this up. I want them to remember a small group of people and a small amount of world building and history, so that they can immediately jump right into the action, be interested in Dre, and want to know more about his story. And that's kind of the aim of Dre's Demise. I saw a lot of let's call it advice when I first started writing. I was always interested in self-publishing, but didn't get into it for a long while until I met you and our other author friends, and didn't pull the trigger. But what they always say is, put something out there as a novella to interest people, get them into things. But they always treated it as a throwaway. And the approach I took here was I have a lot of pride in what I write. I want it to be the best possible product. People are spending money and time, time being more valuable than the cost of the book, frankly. And I want people to feel like they got a good story, an interesting story from this. And so that's always been my goal with this novella. And as an indie, I think that's really important to focus on, is a quality product that should you shouldn't be able to differentiate between it and a traditionally published book.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really great about the indie space, is that every book I've read this year has been an indie book, and I could have picked them off the shelf at the library or the bookstore, and you could have told me they were trad, you could have told me they were indie, I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. Everyone is just putting out such a high quality of story that it makes me proud to be an indie, and it makes me proud either way that people are following these passions and going through all this work to make their dreams happen. But the fact that they're striving for like the highest level of quality with their stories is just so it's so inspiring to be in this space, and then know, okay, well, this person did this, and I hold them in very high regard. Maybe I can do that too.
Absolutely. Right. And what I love about my novella is I'm giving it away. I didn't even realize how enjoyable that would be able to say, you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free e-copy. I'll send it to you if you want it. I'm thrilled to be able to do that. It's such a good feeling. And I know that if I was traditionally published, that probably wouldn't happen. So I'm very proud to be an indie in that way as well. I was talking to Andrew Watson about that earlier today. Just, it's pretty easy to market. This is free as an e-copy. Anytime you want it, right?
There's quite a market out there for, hey, free book. Like, that's that's why libraries are so popular, but you don't have to give the book back. Keep it and reread it as many times as you want. Which is always great. When you said earlier, I'd love to go back to what you said about world building, where with this novella, you wanted to give people a very small amount of characters to keep track of, very small, very succinct story, and a very small amount of world building to memorize or remember. So when you set out to world build for a novella, and this is a little bit different because it's part of this larger series where you've created this world, but I'm curious to think of, like, specifically with this novella, what about the world did you want the reader to know and to fixate on right away? And if this goes into spoilers, feel free to deflect to the next question, but I'm wondering what you wanted the reader to focus on specifically with the world, since it was such a short word count, and since you didn't want to bog them down and keep the story moving.
That's a great question. So I would say that has evolved over time with the editing process. When I wrote it, I wanted people to hone in on, this is action, this is military fantasy, this is fantasy, this is a world where there are kind of rules, and we're in kind of this medieval Greco-Roman era where there's axes and shields, and what it evolved into is what I talked about earlier, which is I want people to gravitate towards this character because I love my protagonist. I think he is the coolest. He doesn't always make the best decisions.
Yeah.
but I really enjoy him, and I want people to get that enjoyment out of the story of his journey, and stick with him in the lows so that you can get to the highs. Right? You can't have success without some kind of all is lost moment, right? And it's true throughout our lives. Stephen Pressfield talks a lot about this. Save the Cat talks a lot about this, that, we all have all is lost moments, which are why our successes are so euphoric. And so Dre is going to have a dark night of the soul, and he's going to have an all is lost moment, but he will climb out of that hole. He will claw his way back to the world, and facing that challenge is what I wanted people to gravitate towards. That this character is, he's strong enough to face the challenge in front of him.
Yeah, and I think there's something even within the titles of these two books that really kind of foreshadows that climb. Because the first one is Dre's Demise. He's obviously failed at something, or something went wrong. But then the Dragon Legion is just such a powerful name. It has regal connotations. It insinuates that they are tough and brutal and really trying to prove something. And so even in the titles of these books, it shows that trajectory of going ever upward. I'm pretty sure that my camera just put me like going in the wrong direction, because going right to left instead of left to right. But you guys at home know what I'm trying to say. It's the titles are very well done, and I can't help but think that was probably very specific. Like you were particular in the titles of those two.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, this kind of goes back to when I first started writing in the Sunborn series. Actually, I'm not going to give away the title because I am going to rewrite that book. It is actually book 1, 2, 3. It's going to be book 3. So I'm rewriting that book, but it's very important, obviously, when you have a series that you have similar styles of titles, and they don't always come to you easy. And Dre's Demise was one title that I had considered. I considered a number of other titles, but you want to make sure. I want to make sure that people understand what the focal point of my stories are, and the first little bit is about a prince. That's what the novella is about. The novel is about a legion, and the next book will be about a kingdom. And so, I want it to be simple, straightforward. We talked about it earlier. It's Happy Dre Day or Happy Day of Demise. Like it's a very simple title because I want people to know what it's about.
Yeah, personally, I'm a fan of Dre Day, but
Dre Day.
I'm more a fan of Dre Day than Day of Demise, but Day of Demise is also pretty awesome. Like that sounds sounds like a Ryan Cahill The Fall type. Oh, sorry, hang on. I can't believe I fell into my own trap.
You did. You did. Good. Like I'll take the comparison.
Yeah, that's right. We'll take the drink if you get the comparison. That's a fair trade. But it really just hammered home that the tragedy that he climbs his way out of in Dragon Legion. So yeah, I'm excited to. Obviously, it's still in the works, but I'm excited when you finally reveal the title of book 2 in Sunborn, and I'm always excited for title reveals because it gives us a little bit of a clue into stuff. I know that Caden Love, when he told everyone his second Paladins of the Harvest book was going to be Duet of Pernicious Eels, I'm like, what does that mean? It's such a like.
Oh, cool.
It's so awesome, and I'm very, very jealous that that's something that I hadn't thought of.
Or Scott, The Sound of Starfall. Can we
Yeah,
talk about that? Like the
yeah.
rest of the gods, Josh. Like
Hmm.
these guys are just wizards with words. It's so
I
fun.
know. It's and then then I just put like a noun and a verb together, like Pathlighter.
But
That's
but also awesome. And then follow that up with Death Metal Bird, which is the most epic. The most epic.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, I with the series being what it is, are you going to try and keep the titles relatively within the same vein? Like you've got Dre's Demise and you've got Dragon Legion. Obviously, there's a the in front of it, but is it going to be kind of like Dre's Demise, then the Dragon Legion, then the something something, or are you just going to kind of uh, do what you think like feels right, no matter the word count of a title? Because I know Martin always does the something of something, you know. Um,
I'm not a sucker for pattern. I think pattern
mhm,
is important in language, but
mhm,
I also think that there's a time and place. And so it'll, I'm going to keep kind of a cadence, but I'll
mhm,
tell you that it's going to be a cadence of the series. So the series is about Legion, a kingdom, a
mhm.
council, and an empire.
Okay.
And so there's kind of like there's some different players. Without going into spoilers,
Mhm.
the council, the kingdom of Landor, the
Yeah.
Dragon Legion, and then Empire, which is kind of one of the major themes.
Mhm.
All of those will play into the titles. Um, I've got a rough kind of draft of it. Like I've talked to my wife about different options, and we've kind of batted back and forth.
Yeah.
What sounds cooler? But
Mhm.
sound cool has some value. Frankly,
Yeah.
sound cool is
Yeah.
important, right?
I mean, that's what I'm planning on doing with the Pathlighter trilogy too, is that it's gonna still be like the one word but the noun verb thing. So
Yeah.
book two, I'm still working on it. I'll probably around the 1 year anniversary of Pathlighter, which is coming up, I'll release the title for book two, even though I'm still drafting it. Moving kind of puts a hold on things.
Yeah, of
But
course.
the nice thing about writing is that you're it's not like those words are going anywhere. It's not like every day you're not writing, there's someone pressing the backspace button or something. So
Mhm.
it'll still be there, and I'm excited to keep hype going for that series, and I'm excited for people to read this novella on 31st. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. I think what you've done with the Pathlighter and Death Metal Bard are just they're just original, right? Heavy inspiration, obviously Greek
yeah,
mythology, and you found a way to make it yours, which is just awesome. Like it's just so much fun. Uh,
thank you, man.
no, of course. Like
I
I think you're a
appreciate that.
fantastic storyteller, and
Mhm.
and so I'm excited to see where the series goes.
Mhm.
There's so much space in there, right? Uh,
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing about writing a book too, and I'm sure you're dealing with this with Sunborn too. Is like you have like you have the guardrails or the posts, but there's so much space in between all of those.
yeah.
You might have these spots where you want the series to go, or you want specific things to happen in the series. There might be a single scene you've had in your mind forever, and then you are wondering like what goes in the space in between. And especially with the generational series, I'm really excited to see how that all comes together. Like I think you have a really good foundation for a very um, like a very good like series for people to um, stay along with for hundreds of years in book time, but only a few years in actual time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And one of my goals is to make it interesting over that time period, and to make sure that you're getting an interesting section of each kind of
Hmm.
character's lives, right? Because you
Yeah.
you can tell someone's entire life story, and it can be interesting, but
Hmm.
um, what does this 1 year look like is
Yeah.
my perspective, right? How do I look at this character's life in this year? Dragh'S Demise is like a week.
Yeah.
Right? It's a week of somebody's life, and that
Yeah.
maybe a week, maybe it's a couple of days, really. And
Yeah.
so, that's kind of the interesting part of telling a
Mhm.
novella versus a book versus a series is I get
Yeah.
to go over like basically 4 or 5 generations, and
Mhm.
it's just fun.
I think that your storytelling, not just of Dre's demise, but of your plans for Sunborn, it brings back a quote that I can't remember who said it originally, but they said there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And I think you've
Oh,
tapped into
absolutely.
that. I think you've tapped into that with the Sunborn series and Dre's demise in particular, because there is so much that happens in this little book that you know can change the trajectory of an entire world. And it I think one of the really good things that is attributed to you as a writer is that you do not waste words. Like
Hmm.
you are very good at like you're very good at like building this world and keeping it as like tough and brutal and bloody and harsh as it should be. And one of the ways that you're able to do that is that you don't necessarily have to like spin on and on about it. Like you do a very good job of keeping the focus of the reader where it needs to be.
Oh, thank you for that. I really
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
It's funny,
absolutely.
you find your voice, right? You write
Yeah.
decades, and your voice kind of just appears one day. You don't even go
Hmm.
looking for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like death metal bard for me was almost like a melodic prose.
Yeah.
Like the way that
Yep.
you wrote death metal bard, it was a song, and that was what was
Hmm.
so fun for me. And so yeah, no, appreciate that because I feel the same way about yours. It's you've got your style at some point as an
Yeah.
author, right? And it's kind of just it's what
Yep.
you write.
And the nice thing too is that we're as authors on that style yet. Like we have a voice that we have at this particular moment in time. And um that style, that voice might change from book to book or series to series, but it all signifies growth both as writers and people, and how we think stories should be told. Um and it's just kind of a fun thing to think that, like, hey, my voice and my flow from one book to the next might be different, one series to the next might be different, and that makes for a more diverse bibliography that I'll have when I'm finally done writing, when I'm 98 and decide to hang up the pen or something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's space to grow, which is the beauty of this art
Hmm.
form, right?
Yeah. Yeah, always room for growth, and there's always something new to be discovered.
Yeah.
And that's really the amazing thing about art, is that art doesn't have an expiration date, and there's not a limit to what humans can create.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Absolutely. It's
Mhm.
and that's what I find fun about all of this is, you know, there are no limits to where your story can go, right?
Mhm.
So, I kind of write little segments of life, but the sky's the limit, right? If you want to skip
Yeah.
1,000 years, if you want to talk about the calamity of the collapse of the empire
Mhm.
in 472 AD version, then
Yeah.
then I can, and it's a hoot because it's all up here,
That's right.
right? So the
It,
written word, and then there's all this stuff up here that I love to kind of pepper in, which makes kind of for a fun story. Easter eggs.
yeah. Yeah. One thing I've wanted to ask for a little while as well is, when you are like brainstorming new stories and stuff, what kind of concepts have you, like, are you thinking about a series after Sunborn? Like, are you thinking of staying in Sunborn for a while? Are you thinking of branching out to other stories and other worlds and stuff? Or because that's something that didn't really want to do originally with Death Metal Bard, is I was like, oh well, I'm really invested in Pathlighter and that world that I've done. But after the first Pathlighter came out, I needed a palate cleanser. I needed to do something else, something short, before jumping back into this, this dark epic trilogy that I was in the middle of doing. So is there something like that for you with Sunborn? Like, is there another series kind of in the works, or even something just like cooking up in your brain?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
So I can tell you a little bit about it. I've written another book, and so that other book, I wrote it after the Dragon Legion, and it is about a street busker in the 1850s in London.
Alrighty.
He finds out magic is real when his body is stolen from him, and he has to steal his body back.
That's awesome. So kind of a I don't know. It almost feels like a Scotland Yard, like chasing Jack the Ripper almost, but with like magic body snatchers. That's so cool.
Yeah, and then he has to foil a plot to kill the queen.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's I have no idea where that one came from. I just actually no, that's a lie. I was watching Sanderson's lectures when I first started writing, and I had this idea, and it came to me, and I talked to my wife about it, and I said, "Oh my God, I have too many stories. I need to write them," and this is one of them. And I wrote it down in a little red moleskin, and then I wrote the book a couple of years later.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So when I'm done Sunborn, I'm going to write that whole series. It's a couple of books. It's probably 3 books.
Yeah.
I've written the first one, and I loved every minute of writing it, just like I loved Sunborn. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so nice that you are able to, like, you have both of these at the same time. And so one of the nice things about having multiple series or multiple things in the works is that even if you're not getting to like the drafting part of something yet, you can just write a couple notes on something. Even if it's, you don't have any plots or characters yet, you just have vibes. Yep. You just have like an idea, like what if this and this, and you go, oh, that's awesome, and then you write that down. That's something that is always, as a writer, something that always just like kind of gives you that dopamine boost in your brain. Like it just feels like really cool to come up with a new idea.
Oh, it's the best feeling. And as I get older and I think back, we reflect on I've told these stories and done these things. I think, man, there's not enough time in the world for me to write all these stories.
I know.
I'm going to write as many as I can.
Yeah. The thing that I think of a lot of times is like, you think of this really cool idea and you're like, oh yeah, that'd make an awesome story. And you're like, well, shit, guess I got to go write it. Like, it's like, oh, I actually have to write the thing. I can't just like will it into existence.
Yeah.
But that's part of what makes the eventual release day and the launch day so exciting, is that you put all this work into it, and you've had beta readers go over it and tell you what is good about it and what's not so good, and so then you shore it up some more. You send it to an editor, they put the finishing touches on it and fix it up for you, and then you go through all of these people, like the cover artists and designers, and you finally come to this pinnacle that is your book, the one that you're holding right now. And it's just a lot of time and in a lot of cases a lot of money spent on something that now has your name on it. You can go up to the shelf and pick up something with your name on it.
Yeah, it's so I think indescribable. I'll steal this from Stephen King. Indescribable is not something you can say as a writer. It is a beautiful feeling to pick up your book, and having this on the shelf next to the novel is so much fun.
Yeah.
I get to open it up and I get to give it to my friends and family, and I get to give it to readers on my newsletter, and it's a hoot. I love it.
Yeah, it's I don't know, and then having the second one out too, like having the novella out after the novel, I think is also a really good feeling too, because then you're like, oh, this isn't just a one-time thing. I can do this as much as I want, you
Yeah.
know. And that's also a really beautiful feeling. That's something that I've noticed in the last couple months of marketing for this novella, and I'm sure you felt that as well. As you're like, oh, like I'm not just a one-trick pony. I can do another book. I can do another book after that. I can keep writing books, and the world is a better place for it.
Yeah. No, I would echo that sentiment. It is a good feeling to get the second one under the belt, because
Hmm.
you do worry, am I a one-hit wonder?
Yeah, exactly.
No pun for Death
Yeah,
Metal, but am I going to get the one hitter and that's it, or what?
exactly. Well, too, as well, like when you're doing a series, you put something out and it says book one of the Sunborn series or book one of the Pathlighter trilogy. You're like, oh, I need to do the others now, and that can put a lot of pressure on an author, particularly an indie,
Yeah,
especially because the deadlines are the ones that you set on yourself, which can be as much of a curse as it is a blessing.
I absolutely agree. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, but it's important to look back and remember why you did it at first, and don't lose sight of that. But it gets easy to, especially when you see someone putting out like 3 books in a year, or you see someone's Kickstarter and you're very happy for them, and you're just like, oh man, do I need to be doing that? But everyone is on their own path, everyone's on their own trajectory.
we're on our own journey, right? I was happy to get this
Hmm.
done, and it took me months, and that's okay.
Yeah,
I enjoyed every bit of it, right? Enjoy the journey.
yeah, exactly, journey before destination.
Yep, absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Do we want to call that?
Yeah, I think we can. Before we go though, let the people know where they can find you, and where they can pick up Dre's Demise.
Sure thing. So, appreciate that. So I'll put this in the chat and I will show. So, IsaacHillAuthor.com. If you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free e-copy. You can find me at Isaac Hill Author on everything. Threads,
Hmm.
Instagram, Twitter /X. Really not sure how I feel about that. I'm still calling Twitter. And
Yeah.
if you want to find me on Amazon, it's just Isaac Hill, and you can find both the Dragon Legion and Dre's Demise. Little tidbit for you: if you sign up for the newsletter, you will get the first 3 chapters of the Dragon Legion for free as well. Just a little
Oh,
taste of the first book to see if you're interested, and then there's an Amazon link there too, and it's
that's
in
awesome.
Kindle Unlimited. Yeah,
And may I just say, you should sign up for Isaac's mailing list, but you should also just get the physical copies of his books, because they look amazing on a shelf.
oh,
They look awesome on a shelf, and they've got that flop. They've got the flop that authors dream of when they think of their own book.
appreciate that very much, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, until Saturday, my friend.
All right, until Saturday. We'll see you later,
Yep.
folks. Thanks for
See
streaming.
everybody. Yep. Bye.